Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of what is the Arsenal News Show, joining you every morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. Thank you, as always, for making us a part of your morning routines. It is very much appreciated. I hope that you've had a fantastic week so far. And welcome to match day. Arsenal returning to European action in the Champions League, where they're facing RC Lens, the team that, of course, beat them in their earlier clash in France, the only side that have beaten Arsenal in Europe this season. And Arsenal looking for some revenge. I imagine that video that went a little bit viral after the game with the Lens players in the dressing room celebrating rather hard may be used in a certain team talk, I imagine. You know, Arteta does like his props in team talk, so maybe he will reference that video and give Arsenal plenty of motivation to come out the blocks and put Lens in their place. But they're no meager size. They are a very decent side. They came second, of course, in the French league last season. They've already beaten us, as we've already mentioned here. And so Arsenal, I think, are going to have to be on their best to try and get the win. And we've got to keep our fingers crossed that they do, because if we do win, we guarantee top spot in the group. And nothing in this Champions League campaign for any team can be assured until the very final whistle. Just ask any Newcastle United fan. Good morning to those joining us in the chat box. Thank you so much for doing so. It is very much appreciated. Good morning to A1, to Blackshine, to Vivian, to Ray. We've got Peekahoo, Rowan, Damien, Brian, Sweating Merlot, Johnny, Paul, Marcus, Carlton, Rich, Old Dave, Maximius, SNGC, Stephen, Carl, Franklin. We've got Mr. Ree, Red Star, Stevie, and plenty more, and guys and girls in the chat box. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. I saw a comment that I wanted to highlight that's now disappeared. Oh, that's a shame. There was a comment that I really wanted to throw up, but now oh, here it is. Brett says, I'm live for the second time ever. I must be getting better at life. Can't wait to hear what today has in store. Complete ego, just completely marinated my ego. Yeah, there. I love that. Love that. Thank you. More comments like that, please. Let's jump into today's show, shall we? First of all, if you haven't yet watched our preview show for the game between Arsenal and Lens, please do go and catch up. I was joined by, as always, three fantastic guests from our members Discord server. I was joined by Mike and Alex and debutant Leo, who did a fantastic job at looking ahead to tonight's game. We discussed our lineups, our predictions, and our thoughts on the Champions League so far, and some of the specific players and the narratives surrounding them as well. So if you've not given that a look yet, please make sure that you go back and watch it. It is the latest upload on the channel before this show, so I recommend that you go and do it. Now, we'll focus for a few minutes now on Mikel Arteta's press conference, which took place yesterday. Of course, there was an open training session as well, in which Ben White trained away from the main group, at least for the start of the session, and there was no Fabio Vieira present whatsoever. Ethan Neri and, of course, Miles Lewis Skelly were both involved after both of them have been missing with the England youth side and have returned to Arsenal to reintegrate, and are clearly reintegrating with the senior side, which is fantastic news. Maybe we'll see them in the squad tomorrow, or rather tonight. We'll have to wait and see. Let's go through some of these comments, though. He was asked about Fabio Vieira, and he said, yeah, we've got a problem with him. He's been having some discomfort, and we tried to have alternative treatment with him, and he wasn't improving. So we've sent him to see a specialist, and that was to get an operation done on his groin. And we did that yesterday. We're expecting him out for weeks now. And when he might be available, he says we don't expect him to be back this side of the of the winter break, which of course is in January. So let's see how he evolves. And obviously the operation was done yesterday, so we're having to wait to see, using my headline there. But we will take it as it comes. And I think that this could have a significant impact on any potential January exit for Fabio Vieira. Vieira, of course, was linked with the move to Marseille on loan. Any chance of that happening, I think, has taken a significant hit because of this injury. So that's something that needs to be considered. Talking about Ben White, he says yes, and he trained the day before the Brentford game and he was feeling good, and I think he'll be available. That's very good news for us. So even though he wasn't necessarily training with the team from the off yesterday, he has trained and has shown great resilience, so he should be okay and with the group. About winning the group with a game to spare, he says, yeah, we want to win the game, that's for sure. We want to be top of the group, and the opportunity is there for us tomorrow against a team that causes problems and that we've already experienced against them. So we have the right motivation to do that tomorrow. Targeted is a word that I think Bukayo Saka has been focused with, and I think that he has been targeted by a number of players a number of teams, of course, focusing on him. And Arteta said, well, he's targeted because he's one of our most dangerous players. And the teams know that. And they try to stop our strengths, that's for sure. What he's done in those 5 years since his debut is remarkable at his age. When you look at his stats and how consistent he's been, it's very rare to see that at his age, especially in those positions at top clubs. It's a big compliment to him. Absolutely, it is. On Trossard, he says, I don't know about the financial side, about him being one of the best value for money signings. I'm not an economist at the club. I think he's a tremendous player that has great talent and especially great intelligence to play the way that we want to play. So he's a really good fit for us. Talking about enjoying the Champions League, he says, I am enjoying it. It's a great feeling. It makes you proud. It makes me feel that this is the level the club should be at. And we've been competing really well. So let's continue to do so. And whether he has something to prove, I remember I asked Arteta once if he had something to prove in Europe a few weeks back. I think it was before potentially the PSV game or the Sevilla game, one of the two. I asked Arteta if he has something to prove in Europe. And being asked again, he says, for sure, we have to prove ourselves. We have to come back to Europe being the club we want to be and have the presence and those results to tell you that we are back in a strong way. We haven't done that yet, and that has to be done. And lastly, kind of going into the last bit of the press conferences, talking about Smith Rowe and Thomas Partey. He says it is a possibility that they could be back before the January break, but it will depend on how they evolve. Emil has already been on the pitch doing some jogging, so I don't know how long it's going to take. Normally he is a quick healer, and Thomas Partey is the same. We have to make sure that when they come back, they are at their best as well. We don't want to rush them back, but at the same time, the team needs them, because at the moment we are missing some key players. So there you go. I mean, optimism around Partey and Smith Rowe's potential return to the club. That's good. We want to see them back as soon as feasibly possible. So let's hope that they return before that. Not only the January break, but there's some suggestions out there I've seen circulating that people are hoping that they might even be back before Liverpool, which would be brilliant. But I haven't got any information to suggest that that is an accurate description of their situation. Moving away from Arteta's press conference and the game against Lens, and to finish the news section with some transfer news. According to Chris Wheatley, Arsenal have held talks with Genoa defender Radu Dragusin. Now, I can't say that I know too much about the player at all. I've just literally come to really learn about the player himself. But he's a 21-year-old centre-back, which gives us a little bit of information about maybe the age profile defenders that Arsenal are going for. He is right-footed. If you remember, Arsenal have got a couple of left-footed centre-backs in Kivior and Gabriel, but right-sided centre-backs, we only really have Saliba. Yes, Tomiyasu could also play there. Ben White can also play there, but we do think of White and Tomiyasu now more so as fullbacks. And so potentially options to go out into the market and sign a defender aren't that surprising considering the lack of depth. I remember a comment that Arteta made during one of his earlier press conferences this season where he said that we are shortest in defence, even with the absence of Timber. And I think even with the inclusion of Yuri and Timber, we still have some depth question marks. If we were to lose Saliba, that all of a sudden makes us very, very light, or any one of our defenders, really. We become very light very quickly. So I think adding another defender to the group is certainly something that Arsenal have an interest in doing. And if indeed these suggestions that talks have been held with Radu Dragusin, the Genoa centre-back, who is a Romanian international, has played 12 times already for the senior Romanian team at 21 years of age, then maybe that's something that we need to look out for. And finally, our headline story of the day. Duncan Castles in the Daily Record has reported that both Arsenal and Liverpool are said to be exploring the financial capacity of any deal that it would take to sign Kylian Mbappe. Yes, you heard that right. The Kylian Mbappe links are back. They're thriving. They're here. We're talking about them. But Duncan Castles of the Daily Record reporting this story that clubs, with him being a free transfer in the summer, it's worth remembering, what would it take? Is it possible? Could Arsenal be a side that could put together a package that would entice Kylian Mbappe, that would convince him that Arsenal are the place that he needs to move? We know that he's got affection for the club previously, but he's also spoken very highly of Liverpool as well. I think even he might be something of a Liverpool fan. Arsenal have had their history of Mbappe. We know that Arsene Wenger spoke to Mbappe about a potential move when he was at Monaco. That obviously never materialised, but this is the type of deal that obviously I think Arsenal should look to do. You might think, what the hell is Tom doing? He's lost his mind. But let's be really honest with each other. If Arsenal want to go and win Champions Leagues, if they want to go and win Premier League titles, Arsenal need to put themselves in the bracket of trying to sign the biggest and best players in the world when they become available. And that's what we did when we signed Declan Rice in the summer. If you'd have said to me 3 years ago, do Arsenal have a chance of signing Declan Rice? I would have said no. He's going to go to Chelsea or Manchester City. But Arsenal have elevated themselves into a position in the market where they do now compete for the biggest names, where they do go and throw three-figure £1 million deals down for players that they want to go and get. And so whilst I think that still it is incredibly unlikely that Kylian Mbappe would end up at Arsenal, because I think even him being a free transfer, the financials to do with his wages, to do with any potential signing on figures, etc., intermediary costs, it would still be an incredibly difficult deal for Arsenal to do from a financial standpoint, even without the added obstacle of a transfer fee involved. So don't get your hopes up, but don't lower your, and I don't want to use these terms like, because I know they get thrown around a lot, but I do think that the word standards can often get misused. But I do think at Arsenal, we do need to be, at this moment in time, asking and hoping that Arsenal go out to try and sign the biggest and best players in the world, because we want to be at the elite level, winning the Premier League, winning the Champions League. And because of that, we do need to be a little bit not aim towards signing those biggest players on the market. I think that's ultimately what we do. And there is obviously a question mark about his mannerisms and his temperament and his personality. So that would obviously need to be taken into account as well. And I know that's put off a fair few people, but there's no doubting that he's one of the best players in the world, not just in his position, but in general. So if Arsenal were able to be anywhere near as successful in the market as they were with Rice with Mbappe, then I think it's certainly a risk worth taking. But it would be very, very expensive. Don't get me wrong. But you know what isn't too expensive for you, especially with the help of a certain discount, is a subscription to the finest VPN service out there. And that, of course, is NordVPN. And by going to nordvpn.com/Gooner, you can stop yourself from falling into an expensive trap by getting a very, very good discount off this service. And not only that, but you can get some extra months thrown in free of charge, completely free, some extra months on top of a subscription as well. It's worth doing, because what Nord does, if you're not aware, it keeps you safe and secure online. It gives you added protection whilst you're surfing the net. It stops these people around the world from them tracking you. And, you know, you see these words, cookies, thrown up. Cookies. I think that they are the biggest lie on the internet when you jump into any specific website. It's like, do you accept these cookies? And I'm like, no, because you know what? If you just change that word cookie into the word tracker, which is basically what they are, no one would say, yes, I accept all trackers, because that's effectively what, if you weren't aware, cookies are basically used to look at your data, and so they can send you loads of rubbish emails and sell it wherever they blooming like. It's really annoying, and that's why I just hate cookies in this form. I'm very, very big fan of cookies in the bakery form, but less said about that, the better. I'm on a diet. But please do get involved with this offer, of course. You can get a significant subscription discount off a 1 or 2 year plan to change the entire landscape of your phone, laptop, tablets, usage of the internet, and it gives you the ability to change your geolocation, of course, as well, to jump over to any possible destination digitally. Right, let's go to part 2 and your questions right after this. Okay, let's jump into the chat box. If you haven't dropped a like on the video already, please make sure you do. Thank you to everyone that continues to support the channel. I've not exactly been pushing the likes as I had been in such desperation as I did during the international break, but you know, we were still hitting near 1,000 likes on our last few videos, which is amazing. So thank you for everybody that's continuing to just like things and yeah, help us out. It is very much appreciated. So please do. And of course, the link down in the description will take you to our live event page. If you want to get tickets for our live event in February, on February 22nd, please make sure you do. I'm very, very happy with the situation with the tickets. So don't miss out. Don't wait for our lineup to be announced, because there may not be any left. Right. Let's go to the chat box then, shall we? This is a good question from Rowan. Rowan says, "Hey Tom, what are your thoughts on the sin bin trials? For me, if it goes hand in hand with yellow cards, I'm for it. But if not, it just gives refs more power to influence games, whether correctly or not." So what Rowan's talking about here is this news that is circulating that came out yesterday that there is encouragement to trial sin bins at a higher level of professional football. If you're not aware of what a sin bin is, basically what it is it's a temporary sending off. You're given a special card. It might be an orange card. And if you're given that card, it means that you have to go over to the sidelines and wait for a specified amount of time, be it 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. Who knows? I think 10 minutes would probably be 5 to 10 minutes would probably be probably what it would be. I think it's a system that can work if it's done in the right way, in the same way that I think that VAR is a system that can work if used in the right way. The problem is that those using VAR are not using it in the right way, and so therefore it's difficult to get on board with it's difficult to get on board with this situation. It's difficult to get on board with an idea that could be misused once again. That's really where my apprehension is with this. So that's very, very frustrating for me indeed. And I think that when it comes to a situation like a sin bin, it can be good for when you see those professional fouls done. You know what I mean by that is where players like come sliding in when a player is on the counter. It was a clear goal scoring potential opportunity, but there was still obviously a lot of work still to do. That's maybe when we could see those situations brought to light and a sin bin used effectively. But it's difficult. It's difficult to know whether or not they would be effective. I think that's probably fair. Rob says, even if we could do it financially, I'm not sure I would want Mbappe. It would destroy our wage structure and be extremely divisive in the dressing room. In 2 seasons, all Arteta's hard work is undone. Okay, let's talk about the wage structure thing, Rob, because I think that it's a fair comment, but one that maybe is getting a little bit too emphasized on. Now, it depends how much Mbappe would be paid. Now, I think let's have a look at what his weekly wage is at PSG. So, according to, let's have a quick look at what it could be. So, Talksport says the mind-blowing £605 million salary for Mbappe. So, 300. I suppose that this is all talking about that link to, was it Al Hilal? I think it might have been. Yeah, Al Hilal. That's the amount of money that was being on offer to him to go to Saudi Arabia. Now, Mbappe, who has 1 year left on his contract, would earn £11.6 million a week. Yeah, that's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? I don't think we'd be looking at anything like that if it was, if he was to move to Arsenal. I think only would we see him earn that ridiculous amount of money if he was to move to Saudi Arabia. If he's moving anywhere in Europe, we're not going to see these types of figures be talked about. I think there's been discussions about his salary previously being something like £500,000 per week, something like that, at PSG. Whether or not that would rise to something closer to 600 or 700, maybe even £1 million a week, I don't think Arsenal can ever justify that amount of money. But if it was to stay around the £500,000 per week mark, if you think about the fact that Bukayo Saka's wage, including bonuses, it's worth always adding on, is around 300,000. I think Havertz is upwards of £200,000 per week. I think that Gabriel Jesus, Thomas Partey, Declan Rice, all upwards. I think, don't quote me on that, but I think they're upwards of that. So if we sign Mbappe, who is considered as one of the top 2-3 players in the entire world, going to less than 200%, or rather, how do I work out this math? Yes, less than 100% more than what Saka is on, including all bonuses. Is that really breaking our wage structure? When you consider his stature, when you consider what revenue and commercial benefit might be brought in by the signing of Mbappe, I'm not sure. However, as Rob says, if he's going to be like 3 times the amount of our highest player, that I think changes things. And obviously, because he is moving on a free transfer, maybe that does open things up. And that's why the suggestion that Arsenal are exploring how much it would cost, that's what we ultimately face is an exploration of how much it's going to cost. And if it's deemed that it's too ridiculous for Arsenal, I'm sure that they won't do it. But I do want to kind of temper the whole, it would break our wage structure because ultimately we don't know. And we're in a situation where we're kind of, I suppose, theorizing. That's the word I'm looking for. We're theorizing about what it might cost. So if it's like 2 times Saka's wage, I don't think that breaks it. If it's 3 times Saka's wage, then I think it breaks it. But it's completely subjective and people's opinions. But I think that considering the stature of player that he is, being the top, alongside Haaland, he's probably the top 2 player in the world. And so if you're signing the next generation of your Messi, Ronaldo battle, which is Haaland and Mbappe, if you're signing one of those two, maybe with Jude Bellingham thrown in there as well, it's difficult to not expect and to even justify paying that amount of money. Chris says, hi, Tom. Regarding the tickets, do you think it's unfair that Arsenal don't do public sales and that you have to pay to be a member of some sort to even get a chance of finding tickets? I think the reason why there's a membership program, especially now, we can talk about previously, but now is obviously it's a way of kind of getting rid of the bots in some ways now these days. Back in the day, it was certainly something which benefited the club financially more, and it still does benefit the club financially. I've not really got a problem with the membership scheme. What I have got a problem with is when they obviously sell memberships that get into a position, I think, that makes it very difficult for anyone to get a ticket. I think silver memberships have been paused, which I think is the right thing to do in some ways, because when you get to a stage where too many memberships is too many, so that what you're buying and what you're paying for is reflective of the opportunity that you have to get a ticket. And I think maybe that's something that needs to be considered. But it's a fine balance. It's a fine argument, and one which we obviously did on the phone and show the other day, which I enjoyed doing, but it certainly raised a lot of worrying thought processes that some fans have. Nicholas says, hi, I saw that someone reported that we're looking at Benjamin Sesko. Really easy link to make. Arsenal have had an interest in him for quite some time. Defence is in trouble. Tom, the amount of disrespect towards what Arsenal was doing on that show yesterday was unreal. Why do some supporters have so much hate towards Arteta and Arsenal? I assume what you're talking about is my appearance on Dan Potts' show with a number of other pundits talking about Arsenal. I think I approached the conversation in the best way I know I can. I think I certainly put across the points which I think are the most reasonable and sensible that there are to put out there regarding things. I don't understand the anger at the moment towards Arsenal, really, even from those within our own fan base. Do I think there's an element of it being to just cause a reaction? I think, yes, there is an element of that. And we don't do that here. I talk about things as I see them. I speak my mind. I tell you, I say it as it is from my perspective. I don't hyperbolize things just to create that reaction. If there's a chance to celebrate, I'm going to celebrate. I found that, a little bit odd when we were discussing that yesterday's show, why there wasn't a celebration after the Brentford goal. I'm an Arsenal fan. I love the club. When they score, I celebrate. I celebrate even when I'm not supposed to, which I'm not supposed to in the press box. I was sitting next to a commentator actually at the Brentford game. And when Havertz scored, there was a fist bump. Not a fist bump. There was a celebration, a pump of my fist. There we go. And after the commentator had finished kind of doing his section on the goal, he gave me a little tap like, I think you might be an Arsenal fan, which was obviously quite a funny moment. But it's just one of those things. Like, I'm not gonna tell people how they can and cannot show their support for Arsenal. The only thing I do have as kind of a minimum expectation is that you want Arsenal to win. That is it. As long as you want Arsenal to win, you're an Arsenal fan. As long as you want Arsenal to win the next game, you're an Arsenal fan. Unless, and there is only one very, very specific circumstance in which you can want Arsenal to not win. And that is if it has absolutely no negative impact in Arsenal's position in the table. And secondly, if it stops Tottenham Hotspur from winning the league. That is the only time. So there you go. Let's go up in the chat a little bit more and tackle some more of your questions. Amira on the sin bin thing says, I feel like sin bins would only work if we used a stop clock. A team could have a player out for 10 minutes and use up half of that time with a tactical injury. Very, very good point. Not something I'd even thought about. Very good point indeed. I agree. I think a stopped clock, I think maybe it should be like 5 minutes of in-game time. So you have a stopped clock for when the ball is out of play, and it's 5, because 10 minutes of in-game play is a lot. So maybe 5 minutes of in-game play would be a more reflective, sin bin period. I think that's a really, really good point. So there you go. Akmal says, so it was Tom that was fist pumped to someone at the Villa game last season. I was not involved in the chaos in the Aston Villa press box. I'm going to Aston Villa's press box again, of course, in a couple of weeks' time, I hope. So that's going to be interesting to return to Aston Villa, where it all kicked off last season. Let's go to James says, remember that like button, guys. Hope Tom and all are well. Thank you, James. Indeed, if you could drop a like on the video, we'd very much appreciate it. Phil says, Tom, I know they're Man City, who are a juggernaut, but the Etihad is considered a pretty dead stadium in terms of crowd noise, yet they were on a 22 winning home record. Is crowd noise a bit overrated? Now, it's really funny that you've left this comment, Fuad. And the reason why it's funny is not anything on you. It's because I actually tweeted this very thing not so long ago. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to find the tweet because it was quite a while ago. I say it was quite a while ago. I don't think it was that long ago. Let me see if I can find it. It was before my controversial Doku Havertz tweet. So let's see if we can find anything below that. Here we go. I found it 5 days ago. I tweeted, Manchester City are by far the most successful club in England of the modern era. Yet they have arguably the worst atmosphere of any of the big six teams, perhaps even of the top half, perhaps even in the whole league. So how much does the atmosphere play a part in a team's success? And I think that this is a really, really interesting question, because we talked about on that phone-in show about how the atmosphere can affect and help the team. And to a degree, I think that it does. I think that an atmosphere can have a positive impact on the team. But I don't think that it is anywhere near as much of a impact as maybe some believe it to be. For instance, I thought that the atmosphere in the Man City home game this season when we won 1-0 was worse than the atmosphere when we lost 3-1 last season and 2-1 the season before that. I think it was worse than those games, and yet we won. So I think that's a good case study of how the atmospheres aren't, then and it's never going to be a difference maker, I don't think, for a team like Arsenal. I think the level of quality is too much. But I think when you look further down the league, I think when you look further down the footballing pyramid, I think for teams that maybe aren't on the same level of Arsenal, atmospheres have a bigger impact. So if you look, and Marcus says it does impact, you look at the Lens game, I said that I felt like the atmosphere in Lens had a huge impact on Lens being successful in that game. And I do think that. But I think that's because it's for a different team. Lens, obviously, in terms of quality level, with respect, are not on the same level as Arsenal. And so I think that that's because the impact of atmospheres may be more impactful on teams further down the footballing pyramid than it is at the top. So I think there's probably a correlation between how elite a club is along the bottom and impact of atmosphere. And I think the higher up you go in terms of how elite a team are, the impact that the atmosphere has, I think it's probably a downward trend as you go up. So that would be my estimation and my theory. So yeah, there we go. Mikey says, speak on the Newcastle tears, Tom. Ben says, are you upset that Newcastle got a crap decision last night? In all fairness, VAR is just bad at the moment. Kaiser says Newcastle were robbed and serves them right. Trip 2 says, I do feel sorry for Newcastle last night. I don't feel sorry for them at all. I tweeted last night. I think, what was my tweet last night? Again, I don't want to misquote myself. I tweeted last night saying, where is it? With the, I don't know if you've seen Hot Fuzz, but Nick Frost, there's a scene in Hot Fuzz where he just has he's reloading his shotgun, I think it is at the time. He's just like, shame. What a shame. And the tweet was, tough, isn't it, when the wrong decision goes against you, Newcastle. Yes. I don't care. Obviously, I care in the sense that it's an awful decision. And in the context of refereeing and VAR, terrible decision. Awful. Never, ever, ever a penalty. Never in a million years is it a penalty. Do I feel sorry for Newcastle? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I could not give a flying you-know-what about how mugged off Newcastle fans feel about this result, because it is so much calmer. It is just so much calmer because, as Arteta said, the decision to award that goal against us was embarrassing. It was a disgrace. It was one of the worst footballing decisions I have ever seen. It is a clear and obvious foul on Gabriel. And then there's big question marks about the other two moments of whether it was out of play and whether it was offside. And that, I mean, they're even irrelevant because the foul is so obvious, especially when literally weeks later, you're ruling out a goal for Man City because of even less contact from Akanji on Alisson. It's just, there's no consistency. It is ridiculous. And if suddenly people are, I couldn't wait to watch back Eddie Howe's press conference, because in Eddie Howe's presser the other day, he called for respect for referees and their decisions. And yet here he is calling the decision really poor. I don't know. It's not much respect. I mean, you have to respect the referee's decision, Eddie. You can't be calling it a poor decision. I don't think that shows any respect to the referee. Oh, it's just great. I love the irony. I love the hypocrisy. I love the contradictions. I love it. It's great. And it's worthy, and they deserve it after what happened and how they approached that, because it was only a matter of time until a decision went against them, and it's happened really quickly, and I'm loving every second of it. So, yeah. Is it a bad decision? Yes, it's awful. It's never a penalty, even though I told a few Newcastle fans in jest that it was last night. But I think, do I care that Newcastle have been mugged off by it? Absolutely not. No, I don't. Have we got a reason to be angry? I suppose that's the separate question. I know that we can have a laugh and a joke and, be frustrated that the Newcastle only ended up with a point, and now that their progression in the Champions League is out of their hands because of PSG beat Dortmund in their final game of the group. Of course, it means that PSG will progress with Dortmund and Newcastle will go into the Europa League unless they lose to Milan. Of course, that would take things out of their hands entirely. Milan could, in fact, still progress. If Dortmund beat PSG and Milan beat Newcastle, they would still go through. So it's going to be a very interesting match day 6 in that group. But let's talk about the actual fact of what it means for the game and try and remove our laughing biases at Newcastle. It is horrific that decision is given. It is awful for the game. It is an utter indictment of how bad refereeing is, not just in the UK, but outside and into Europe. And we've seen it in World Cups that refereeing decisions, again, still are really, really poor. The standard of officiating in the game is horrific to the nth degree. It is so poor, awful. And if that decision is made against Arsenal, there's riots. Imagine that. Imagine that's what costs Arsenal the Premier League. If that's what costs Arsenal a Champions League final or even the trophy, imagine if that decision goes against us. It would be bedlam, and it should be bedlam in Newcastle. Really, they should be taking that awful choice beyond absolutely they should take it to the highest authority, just like I felt Arsenal should have taken ours to the highest authority when it happens to us. And yet you've still got mixed reviews about whether or not it's a penalty. But in this situation, it seems everyone is pretty unanimous in it not being a penalty. And then you look at the other night, Gary O'Neill, we talked about it on Tuesday morning after the Wolves game against Fulham. How on earth Nelson Semedo is pulled up for that tackle to give away a penalty? It's ludicrous. And the ludicrousness of it isn't that they're getting the mistakes wrong. The ludicrousness of it is that they're doing it so often. It's just so frequent. It's just never ending. Every single game day. It's not every single week. Every single day that there's a game, there is something that goes wrong in refereeing. There is a high profile there. We're not just talking about them, it was a corner and actually it was a goal kick, or, it was a free kick in the middle of the park and it wasn't, that led to a goal. It was a yellow card, not a red. We're not talking about some menial things. We're not talking about these menial things. We're talking about game-changing, league-affecting, tournament-tarnishing decisions that are ruining the game that we love on a daily basis. That's what we're talking about. That's where this has got to. And it's because the quality of officiating is just not up to standard. period. And things need to change, and hopefully they do change. And I constantly ask, especially in the UK, for a greater emphasis on diversity, because if you emphasize the pool of people that you allow to, not allow, but just encourage to take up the mantle of refereeing, then you have got a larger pool of people to find the best of the best from. And that's why I want to see an encouragement of a larger, diverse group of people being encouraged to take up refereeing. And by the way, refereeing is not easy. I don't want to turn around and I don't want to completely undermine the profession to the point where we're saying their job's easy and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not, right? And that's why the whole thing about stopping abuse against officials is also important. Stopping the abuse of officials is important because the reason why it's important is that we need officials for the game. We need to have referees, and we need to have a consistent conveyor belt of new referees coming through so that the officiating improves, right? And so that's why when we're talking about the decisions that are made, the errors that are made, we still need to do it within the confines of measured, objective criticism, And we talk about sackings. I want to see accountability. Sackings is not the right way forwards. Accountability is the right way forwards. If you're a referee and you know that one mistake in a big game can cost you your entire career, I don't believe in that. I'm a person that's not for cancel culture. I'm a person that believes in second chances, education, and making sure that it's an encouragement of improvement. That's the way forwards. I know that a lot of people wanted to see every referee sacked after a big decision goes against their club, but I'm not in that place. I'm not in that position of wanting referees sacked for making bad calls. I want to see referees held accountable, and what I think the best way of doing that is by they get demotions down to a lower league for a few weeks or for a season if they're doing it on a consistent basis, and another referee is given an opportunity instead. But the thing is if you encourage an environment where referees are in a period where if a big mistake happens, they're facing the sack, who on earth want to do that job? Who is going to want to do that job? No one. No one. And some people might turn around and say, well, if I make a mistake at work, I could get fired. I'd argue the mistake that you'd have to make at work to get fired would have to be pretty darn significant to a exceptionally high degree, right? I think that we can agree that mistakes made at work happen. We make mistakes at work. People make mistakes at work all the time. It's about whether or not it depends on the veracity of that error, and it depends upon the frequency of those errors. If there is consistent errors over and over and over and over again, then we can start talking about, whether or not that referee needs to have, whatever action taken against them, or the accountability, or the demotions, etc., and replaced with other officials to give them chances. Then that referee has to work their way back up again. But if you start creating an environment that referees are sacked after a huge, high-profile error and just the one, then it's not an environment that's going to encourage referees to come through. And we need referees. They're always the villain, but we need referees. We need them. So you need to encourage an environment that, yes, promotes excellence, promotes the highest standard of officiating possible, with accountability for when that doesn't happen. But we also need to encourage an environment that encourages new referees to come through and to not be put off. And I can tell you that at grassroots level, at Sunday league level, referees are abused on a weekly basis by parents, by players, by coaches. They are abused. And it's true. They are. And it's not a thankful, it's a thankless task is what it is being a referee. And so I do have a level of standard. And I think that's the way. Tiger and Gooner says, if you stuff up in your job, you get the sack. So should the referees. And again, it's this like broad statement. To quote Tiger and Gooner here, if you stuff up your job, you get the sack. And let's be honest, that's not true. In every case, that's not true. People make mistakes. People make mistakes at work. It happens, and you don't always get the sack for it. You have to make a quite significant error, a pretty awful error to be facing a sack, right? To be doing a pretty horrible thing either to fellow colleagues or to yourself or to bring the company into disrepute or something like that. You have to do something pretty significant. Some people might say, well, they're bringing the game into disrepute by making those errors. But for me, it's about measure. It's about being objective. It's about dealing out punishments or consequences that are equal to the context of the crime. So it's not just a simple thing of they should be punished and never referee again. If you bring up that dynamic, you're never going to have referees coming through. So I think it's really important that we, whilst for sure criticize and be very open and honest, the standard of officiating is not good enough at the moment. At the same time, we need to be in a position where we're also still encouraging the improvement of officiating and still encourage people to want to be referees and want to be officials, because if we don't, we won't have any. If we don't have any, there won't be any sport, or at the very minimum, the refereeing standards will only get worse. So you need to think about that in the broader context when talking about referees. They shouldn't be abused. I'm absolutely on board with the no abuse policy, but they should be able to be criticised. I think that's worth pointing out. Abuse, no. Criticism, yes. And I do that for, when we're talking about Arsenal, when we're talking about Arteta. I had someone leave a comment on my shows. I think it might have even been Answer, is one of our long-term listeners, left a comment saying, if you're criticising Arteta, something to this equivalent, like if you're criticising Arteta, you're basically saying that you think you know better than him. And that's not true. You should be able to be critical. You should be able to scrutinise when you're objective and fair. And I think we do that. I don't think everyone does that, but I think we do that. But at the same time, you can't go too far. You can't cross the line into abuse. And it is that line that when it is crossed, there are problems. So just be aware of that when discussing both referees and anyone else in the game. It's really, really important. Right. Thank you ever so much, everybody, for listening. Really appreciate your time, as always. Thank you for everyone that continues to tune in, support the channel, and all that lovely stuff. If you've liked today's show, please do drop a like. If you're listening on audio platforms, leave us a 5-star review. It takes you just a second, and it really does help us out over on those platforms. If you listen on YouTube, hop over to Spotify, hop over to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. It really does help us out. And if you're listening on the audio platforms, you want to hop over to YouTube and help us here, you can do that. If you want to go to our live event on the 22nd of February, tickets are down in the description. Link is there. I want to see so many of you. I want to put faces to names. I want to see people again and again and again that I've already met before, because our community is fantastic. So thank you to everybody that continues to be part of this community. We will see you. I'll be back tomorrow morning, of course, for a breakdown of the game against Lens. And then on Friday, of course, we'll be looking ahead to that game against Wolves in the Premier League. I'm going to be there at the game tonight. If I see you around, say hello. I always enjoy seeing people at the games as I'm in and around the stadium. So thanks to everybody that continues to show support. I will see you again very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.